So we're going to rejoin Sam Stein KC for his conclusions to his closing statement, and it's such a powerful summary of the numerous failings of the parties involved, including the post office, for the parts they've played in wrecking people's lives, innocent people's lives, by accusing them of things that they didn't do and pursuing them to the ends of the earth. Let's jump into the inquiry.
Let me turn to the use of the subpostmaster contract. It is important to remember that Phase 4 and this inquiry is not solely concerned with prosecutions. Hundreds, if not thousands, of subpostmasters were hounded under the post office tyranny into paying alleged shortfalls which have been generated by the Horizon system. The Post Office seems to have believed that its contract with subpostmasters entitled it to embezzle without proper investigation or even actual losses. Have we got to the bottom of where the subposters' money went when they paid for shortfalls as a result of the Horizon bugs, errors and defects in the system? Was it put into a separate and accountable account or simply stuffed back into the business? John Breeden summarised the position from the contractual side in his evidence on the 17th of October 23. He accepted that the Post Office's protection of the brand image may have come at the expense of doing the right thing by subpostmasters. He described the Post Office's overwhelming desire was to protect the brand at all cost, and that was part of the DNA of the business, and, going on to say, that was dictated from the top, i.e. management. The cultural sickness at the Post Office was embedded, we suggest, in its policies. Mr. Lusher, another former contracts advisor, gave evidence on the 18th of October to the effect that Post Office policy regarding losses wrongly assumed that all losses were the responsibility of the subpostmaster. Subpostmasters were attacked from all sides. They were ruined by the contracts, which were incorrectly interpreted by the Post Office, which many subpostmasters never actually saw. They were unable to properly investigate the cause of discrepancies or losses due to their limited access to back office and accounting data within Horizon. It was, of course, always impossible for a subpostmaster to produce evidence that Horizon was the cause of an alleged loss, and many Post Office investigators appeared to think that subpostmasters were required to do just that. We ask you to make the following findings in relation to this phase of the inquiry. Investigators systematically failed to pursue important lines of inquiry that are pointed away from the guilt of subpostmasters. This was particularly apparent in cases where postmasters had experienced problems with the computer system or had raised those problems in interview or through legal representatives. Secondly, there were failures of prosecutorial supervision as to the identification and pursuit of reasonable lines of inquiry. Thirdly, there were failures to refer to the public interest in decisions to prosecute. Fourth, in a substantial majority of cases, the shortfall concerned was Horizon generated and Post Office could not prove any loss. Fifth, there were systematic failings in the disclosure process at all levels. Sixth, Post Office frequently opposed a requirement that pleas were accepted conditional upon an undertaking that no criticism will be made of the Horizon system. Seventh, that the entire process was procedurally unfair. Where a company or organisation is the alleged victim, investigator and prosecutor, there will always be a tendency for a lack of balance and objectivity. Post Office had skin in the game in every case, and there were no effective independent checks in place. Eighth, the Post Office was driven by improper considerations. They wanted results in criminal prosecution and civil actions to bolster the failing Horizon system and to deter subpostmasters. They crowed when they won cases, but failed to review cases where a defendant had been acquitted. And finally, we ask you to look at these matters altogether. We ask that you make what 10 years ago would have seemed to be an astonishing and incredible finding, that these findings add up to a system that was biased against subpostmasters, a system that failed to investigate, a system that avoided self-analysis, a system which sought above all else to protect the holy Post Office and regarded subpostmasters as at best an expendable cash resource. What does all this mean? It remains the case that perhaps 80% of the wrongfully convicted of the Post Office's victims have not come forward. And there will be hundreds more of sub-postmasters, mistresses, managers and staff whose lives have been blighted by the threats of criminal actions, civil actions and employment issues whose cases remain untouched. This scandal cannot be over until every Post Office victim is identified, every Post Office victim vindicated, and every Post Office victim fully and properly compensated. As to compensation, it needs to be paid and paid now. To those of you who are watching and who are thinking of coming forward, we urge you to do so. Seek assistance with overturning your conviction, unpicking your bankruptcy or IVA, and access the compensation to which you are entitled. We suggest that you have nothing to fear any more from the Post Office. They have been discredited, they have been beaten, and they cannot hurt you anymore. 2 weeks ago, we asked of Mr. Patterson, the UK and European Director of Fujitsu, whether Fujitsu will commit to compensation of sub-postmasters, and he agreed that the establishment of a fund to support sub-postmasters and their families in future education and entrepreneurial endeavours would be a good idea. We asked that question openly, on record, under the public gaze, as our clients have learned that no one in this sorry saga can be trusted, so we must get commitments on the record. Now, given that Fujitsu, it appears, has only just woken up to its own responsibility to sub-postmasters, the working out of the details of such a scheme will take time. But we ask Fujitsu to turn this good idea into a good reality. We need to acknowledge the importance of the inquiry and our independent press, and indeed the general public in continuing to hold the Post Office, Fujitsu and the government to account. Marion Holmes told me last week that unless this tragedy is kept in the public eye, it would die again, as it appeared to have done before her husband's conviction was overturned. Lastly, sir, our brave and remarkable clients would wish to thank you, sir, and the excellent inquiry team for their invaluable work in this inquiry. Phase 5 will draw back the corporate veil yet further and reveal greater details of the scandal and the extent of the cover-up. Sir, as ever, we look forward to assisting the inquiry in that phase. So I don't know whether I achieved the accolade of excellence regarding timing, but those are our submissions.
So that's it. The excellent Sam Stein KC, representing some of the convicted sub-postmasters, sums up brilliantly the arguments and what they've heard, and particularly powerful and taking centre stage the stories of the sub-postmasters that they represent, not only what they've been through during the Post Office scandal, but what they're currently going through with the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry. And as some of the family members have said, it's really important, really important that this is kept in the public eye to ensure that it's not forgotten again. There's been too many false starts. This must be the beginning of the end of the scandal for the sub-postmasters and the families, so that they can finally get the truth, peace and justice that they so thoroughly deserve.
Well, in terms of your prediction of length, certainly, Mr. Stein, a model, if I may say so, and thank you very much for your submissions.